So we've got three primary user interface shapes. We've got a content add-in, and the content add-in is something that works, say for example, really well in Excel. So you might have tabular data that you want to represent in a pie chart. Charts come out the box of Excel, but of course if you've got something fairly bespoke that you want to do, then the content add-in would be kind of a surface that would show it. Mapping is another, geo
So
maps.
if you've got geographic information, you can instead of having that as a chart, you can draw that on a Google map or a big map or whatever. Yeah.
Next up, we've got task pane add-ins, and those are exactly what they say, but they sit in the panels on the left or the right of the main document, and they provide functionality in that kind of task-orientated way. And then finally, we've got mailbox-specific types of add-ins, which kind of work on new and received email, new and received appointments, and they show up contextually based on this, kind of those experiences. Think about like when one of the parcel delivery companies sends you a parcel and it comes with a tracking code.
Yeah.
A lot of them now have got an Outlook add-in that picks up the tracking code and says, this is on the van right now and it will be delivered in an hour, or it will show you a map of where it is and how far it is away from you and that kind of stuff.
And I know another example is Uber have a calendar add-in that allows you to request an Uber from to take you to the meeting that you've got booked out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And these things are really quite amazing because like we said, you can have multiple task panes running, one on the left, one on the right, and they don't interact with each other, but they interact with the document they surround.
Right.
So you can actually create some really complex scenarios where you're sort of activating certain add-ins at that point to generate a kind of experience for the employee, which is, okay, I've got some tabular data, and in this panel it's gone and looked it up in a line of business system, and in the other panel it's gone and doing some additional sort of data entry to fill in some gaps from the main database, putting that all into a spreadsheet. And it interacts with that data, and if you interact directly with the spreadsheet, those two things would reflect those changes. So you can actually kind of build up the layers of those solutions.
And so from a central IT perspective, what are the benefits over the old-fashioned way of doing things in macros?
Well, I think one of the biggest benefits is really that you can deliver these add-ins via either the public marketplace, so the Office store, or more importantly for an enterprise, is probably thinking about your internal Office add-in catalog, so your internal store. So as your business departments might say, okay, we want to provide the rest of the business a set of capabilities. They build them up into an Excel content add-in and publish that to the store. Anyone across the organisation can then sort of get that add-in, pop it into their document and begin using it. So it kind of leads us nicely into talking about what they're built from.
Right.
So if you imagine you're the developer and you've been tasked with replacing that macro that creates some data processing and kind of retabulates it. The old way would be, okay, I'm going to get that Excel sheet and I might throw it out to a web service, do the collection and then pop it back in and sort of go out and come back in as a kind of data processing. Well, now you can approach it by saying, okay, well, I'm going to build my user experience, and that's kind of just a web application that's hosted, and could be Azure hosted or internal. You could put it on your own web infrastructure, and then the little manifest is the descriptive of what the add-in is, and that goes into your store or catalog. So we've got two halves to the diagram. The top half is how you kind of publicize that the app can be installed, and the bottom half is the web infrastructure that hosts those things. So back to the sort of full circle to the question of how they're going to help your central IT kind of manage getting that functionality out. Well, now you've got one application that you can put through the full DevOps lifecycle.
Yeah.
You can manage it, you can scale it, you can secure it, and the manifest can be then picked up by employees around the business and used in the context that it was designed for. And you've got now full control of all of the kind of where it's used, how, who has access to it. You can obviously implement some licensing.
Yeah.
So if you want to cross-sell between departments, you could effectively do that if you chose.
I see this is a really big step forward for enterprise management of this stuff.
Yeah.
From a DevOps perspective, it means that you can deploy very quickly without having to touch everyone's desktop necessarily. From a operations and resilience and reliability engineering perspective, you can, because everything's happening on the website, well, that's where all your business logic's running. You're then able to really optimize that and scale that and make sure that you're logging and, from an operations perspective, aware of what's going on, as opposed to stuff that's happening on people's desktops, which is much harder to manage. And then from just a IP protection perspective, the fact that all you're really putting on the desktop is a tiny XML file without any business logic in it, it protects that intellectual property for your business.
Yeah, and if you think about, user-led design and telemetry-led design now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Those Excel macros and those Word documents and the additional kind of VBA modules that people put into them, you had no idea how many people were using them. How many migrations did we go through over the years where it was like, ooh, I can move the file, but how many people is that going to affect? Whereas now, on your side, you'd be able to look at that telemetry and go, okay, this is a super important line of business application because it's getting used by 80% of the people in this particular department. If this goes down, they're going to lose productivity, and actually scale it appropriately and put the relevant checks and measures in place.
So is there visibility in the from an IT manager's perspective on what apps have been installed on your corporate estate?
Yeah, you can kind of manage that through your store infrastructure internally, so you can certainly see which apps are available. You should be able to effectively manifest where they're being installed. Now there's a neat trick the add-ins do when you send a file, right? So imagine I've got this little content add-in that goes into my Excel sheet and I send it to you, but you're outside my organisation and that's an internal app. What it'll do is it'll take a kind of snapshot JPEG of the last known state of that particular UI, pop it into the file, and that travels with the file for the person outside the organisation. So if you've got sales for that region in a pie chart and some additional features on the right, that will go as a JPEG. So even somebody without the add-in installed still can get a reasonable fidelity of the experience, which again is a kind of a much better experience because you're not going to give away the IP, you're not opening up those back doors to the data. So we're kind of already begun touching on some of the possibilities, but I just want to run through kind of the high-level groups. So what we've got here is visualizations, and they allow you to take that data and show it in a format. The obvious one here is maps, and obviously there's a lot of Bing Maps capabilities already in this store. But you could be thinking about, if you were doing some kind of stock taking piece, you could overlay a store map and say, these are the number of meters of particular grocery lines that we're doing and where they are in that store planogram. Contextual content. So you mentioned Uber. Again, that's exactly it. It's when you've got some content in your mail or your appointment, and it sort of flicks on and says, "Oh, I recognise this. I recognise that packing code mask," or I recognise that this has got an address in it, and I recognise that that's not the same address as your corporation. So, how do you get from A to B? Oh, you can book a taxi. Data enhancement. These ones are the really cool ones where, this visual here it's quite an old example, but it was the kind of go-to-market launch example from the 2012 examples where the FPO in the bottom right-hand corner is a content add-in. There was a task pane add-in that looked against the live web service for the election data, and it brought the two things into the same sheet, and then the kind of sheet behaved differently depending on how the results from the data sources were behaving. So it puts it together, and as I said earlier, because both the add-ins are looking at the sheet. They're not looking at each other. They're kind of just reacting to what the data in the sheet does. Then they look to the end consuming user like something cool is happening, but really it's the underlying data. Master and detail. So we've got some stock there, and then in the right-hand task pane, we've got just more data about that. Think about how many times that you've got some kind of customer relationship management.
Yeah.
You've got sales leads that you've exported, and do you want to see the CRM record in that right-hand panel as you go through those Excel sheets? Even to, do you want to be able to see a list of the team sites that might be associated with that particular customer if you've got customer lists, right? So you can really start being a bit more creative when you start thinking outside of Office. We've got 365 behind us.
You've got lots of other data sources.
Lots, yeah, and the other line of business data.
Yeah.
What can we bring together to give an experience which is going to make that employee far more productive?
And from a security perspective, is this effectively running in the context of the current user?
Yeah.
So all of the data security principles that have been set up should still hold, and you won't be able to see data that you can't access.
Yeah, in principle, obviously it's a lot of those decisions are taken when you design the architecture for that add-in.
Yep.
But yeah, good enterprise architecture, you would say, okay, we're going to use zero AD security, so it's the same identity.
Yeah.
Joins up with all the other ways that you manage the data and
And you
access.
can pass through into.
Yeah, you pass through and do those things. Document authoring. So this is a really good one, and we're actually going to see a live demo at the end, so towards the end of the session, around document authoring. But think about task panes within Word and PowerPoint and OneNote for allowing you to kind of assist that employee getting their document created, doing some of the boilerplating, doing the structural stuff, kind of next-gen templates.
Right, which a lot of organisations spend a lot of time. Well, a lot of people spend a lot of time building that, and everyone's got their own ways of doing that, and getting that consistency and in the organisation is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Dynamic documents, they're kind of when you say, okay, well, I've got some. Imagine you could almost, like mail merge, and you've got the little placeholders, and you say, okay, I've got a data set and I want to mail merge those in. Well, this kind of dynamic document is where you say, I've got a data set and I want to throw it at a Word document, and I want the Word document to know where to put that data. So you're kind of allowing it to take raw data streams and actually present it. So
it's sort of the next version of what we used to have, well, what we still have in Word, for example, with Word properties being able to be displayed on different areas within the page, but then saying, well, actually, I'm not just interested in name value pairs. I want to call a JSON object or a REST API to give me more structured data and then put that into a table or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So if you've got some defined business entities like a customer record, and that's got sub entities within it, you can take that JSON data and you can actually pre-format it and be confident that the data that you've collected, right hand pane might say I want customer A, B and C, and it just throws it in the document and it formats it for you because it knows how to interpret the format. So that's kind of the breadth of Office add-in kind of concepts, if you like.
Yeah, well, the use cases.
Yeah, the use cases,
value,
the business value. And I wanted to kind of just mention Microsoft Graph, because in the context of Office 365, Microsoft Graph is there as a graph-based API, so you kind of traverse the nodes, and we'll see the diagram in a second. And actually, if you start thinking about Office add-ins dovetailing with Microsoft Graph as an experience, you are able to bring the power of Office 365 and all of the 10 or so services directly into people's Word, into Excel, into Outlook. And that for me is just mind-blowing in terms of the things you could do with that. Because, every day people sit in Outlook and they don't want a context switch, they don't want to go here, there and everywhere for things. So if you can suddenly bring Office 365 to them in their mailbox, that's a very powerful kind of thing to be able to do. So we've got the graph is, as I said, a kind of node-based graph, and there's lots and lots of different graph-based technologies out there. So Open Graph in Yammer, you kind of have the Yammer graph and you can traverse that. But it really starts with you as the user. So you can come along and say, who am I working with, or I can go to what's trending around. So Office Graph is being exposed inside the graph. I can look at the events, how their memberships of the groups are traversed. I can get to my notes. So you can really begin to kind of look at all of the data and the connections between the people, the data and the places that they do the work, and conceptualize, okay, well actually what is the experience that team do every day that used to be an email chain, that used to be, you know, files in SharePoint online, but actually wouldn't it be great if we can bring that data in directly from the file into Word? And
yeah.
Again, we're going to
the point is that it's not, you know, directly because of data that's put into the system through, you know, line of business integration or you know, someone filling out a form online. This is a lot of these connections and these relationships between nodes are being formed by machine learning.
Yeah.
So as people go to meetings together, as they're emailed with the same group of people, as they work together on team sites and all these other forms, the graph is learning and using that to drive. So, you know, who are the people around me? What are those people working on, and, you know, how can I be shown that kind of information while at the same time maintaining security context and not showing you things that you shouldn't be able to see.
Exactly. And also with the graph, you know, we're talking about office add-in, but you know, you can think of that same capability being brought into a Windows 10 universal app.
Yeah.
So Graph is now becoming that kind of one place to go to talk to Microsoft Office 365, all the different services across that, and as you say, the intelligent fabrics that are being brought to bear in the AI part, you know, that we've been talking about here at Future Decoded.
And Microsoft are using that today in their applications to drive some of their new experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's on a single URL, and then you go from that URL into your tenant, and then that gives you, you know, traverse into me as an individual, and then I can go to mail or files, which is OneDrive or things like that. So I kind of want to dive in and effectively show you one. So what I've got here is a demo piece of code called the document assembler. And this is available on GitHub today, so you can go over to oh, hang on, we've lost wireless. Perks of doing a live demo at a conference. Oh no, hang on. So there we go. Internet connectivity is a must.
So while you sort out your internet connections, one of the other things that we've been learning about in this conference and other events this year with from Microsoft and in fact lots of other vendors is the rise of artificial intelligence, of machine learning and natural language processing, and also the rise of bots as a thing. So how do you see some of those mega trends translating into things that you could do to actually aid the productivity around collaboration scenarios, around these kinds of applications?
So if you think about, you know, this is a statement of work builder that we would have been showing, and that's looking at a set of data in the background, which you know, effectively I think we'll give up on trying to get it to run on the wireless.
Absolutely.
So the kind of the data sits out in kind of either a list or a database or somewhere else, right? And it's maintained. That particular example was on legal terms and conditions. It was rate cards for employees. So as you assembled the team, you would see different rates being pulled through and bring those up. Now, how do you kind of conceptualize where AI would add value to this? Well, if you're writing a statement of work, you've got a CRM platform. Now, your CRM platform should know the type of customer that you're dealing with, whether you've pitched for them, whether you're already working with them, whether you're incumbent, or it's new business where it's highly competitive. And your AI piece should be able to sort of look across all of the successful bids. And it should be able to bring all that successful bids to bear that says, okay, when we pitch to this type of customer in this market, in this country, at this price, we're 100% successful. When these other factors begin to change, success rates drop. So how you bring that into the context of that statement of work is that within a task pane on the right-hand side, you might start to think about, okay, well, let's look at who I've assembled as the team. Okay, I've got my 3 most senior consultants on, and they're super busy, so I'm asking for too much time. Go off, the AI says, yeah, you're comparatively asking for too much time. Flags that back to you in the right-hand panel and says, you need to drop this allocation, they're not usually available for this long, change the statement of work. So you're bringing the just-in-time intelligence back to that document creation, de-risking it, potentially improving the customer's experience, because you're kind of looking at what you've done while you're writing the document. So it kind of will really help you formulate that document to be very specific for that use case and help them to effectively create a better output and a more successful output. And other sort of scenarios for it might be that you want to look at the analysis around the market. So if you're looking at pitching to a particular customer for an RFP response, it's like, okay, what influences are actually around their business? If they're, we've got, I think, Rolls-Royce here. If you're in the aviation industry and you're a supplier to a particular company, what are their supply chains like? What do you know about that business? What can you influence about the way that they work that helps you engage with them during their RFP process and stuff like that?
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, because a lot of times when we hear about bots and artificial intelligence and machine learning and all of those buzzwords in the industry, a lot of people are saying, there is an intentional conversation that we're having with the bot. We're either speaking to them or we're typing a message into a window and getting a response back. But I think what we're seeing with add-ins and the potential there is, in the background, we can have something just going behind the scenes and picking out keywords and just doing some text analysis and some natural language processing to say, oh, you know what, you've just typed a sentence with a particular customer name in, or company name, so I'm going to go and bring back information about that natively in the app. So I think it becomes less it becomes a supercharged Clippy in effect. Right?
Clippy with a brain, right?
Right. But Clippy that's actually reasonably useful. It's not going to sit there and say, I think you're typing a letter. It's going to be saying, you've put in the client box a client that has to go through some kind of independence check, and as a result of that, be potentially specific metadata or confidentiality statements or IRM policies or whatever need to be applied, and being able to do that on the fly without the end user having to remember to do that or be trained to do that. So I can see a lot of really interesting use cases for that.
Yeah, and you mentioned the bot framework, and obviously there's a big hype around the bot framework at Feature Decoded. There's a big hype in general around bots and what they can do. But really, I think in the case of what the enterprise is going to think about, they kind of need to be tied into what the business is trying to achieve, right? Creating a conversational bot for conversation's sake is not really going to fly with an organisation. You're going to have to be a bit more creative. The example might be, send Ben the document we were working on together yesterday, and
Right.
you know, it would go, well, do you mean this one, Wes, or this one? And you go, okay, it's number one, bang, a la Cortana. Right. So we were kind of already starting to see sort of bots getting involved in our lives. So Cortana is already hooked to 365 really well, and that's kind of giving you that conversational point. But with the bot framework, we're now able to kind of expose that into some of the, you know, up and coming releases of Microsoft technologies, right? Some of the more sort of forward thinking tech that, you know, arrives very shortly and that kind of stuff. So it's at that point the conversation gets drawn together with the bot framework and leveraging the back end. You know, it becomes more than conversation. It becomes, okay, well, now we've got a purpose for that thing to exist.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So I think, you know, the future's bright right now. Would you be saying to people, start thinking about scenarios, and have at the back of your mind how to hook that to line of business applications, and then ultimately to some kind of machine learning or AI framework?
Yeah, I think if you're a serious enterprise developer at the moment, already doing Office 365, then if you're not looking at AI in a serious context, you need to start, because it is where more advanced customers are going to be in 3 to 6 months' time.
Yeah.
And if you know, you get on that curve early, get right there with them, take them on the journey with you, and actually show them that it's more than just a kind of gimmick, if you like.
Shiny toy.
Yeah, shiny toy that, you know, AI is going to do that stuff. And you know, Rolls-Royce are here talking about their IoT and how the data makes them informed decisions about stuff.
Right. Yeah, so start thinking about the business challenges and the business problems to solve.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Well, thank you very much.
That's all right. Sorry about the demo. That's the joys of
Live
2,500 people on the same wireless network.